Colorful exploration games can be relaxing, especially ones that don't involve combat, letting you just explore a world and learn about it. I haven't played a lot of these, but The First Tree and Spirit of the North come to mind. Today's game lets you do that too. A very colorful exploration game about a boy trying to find other humans. Here is my review of Europa for the Nintendo Switch. In this story, you play as Z, a robotic boy that wakes up on Europa, a terraformed moon filled with greenery and machine-like wildlife. Z finds his father's journal instructing him to come to a floating island. The adventure is about Z traveling across Europa, recovering his father's journal, and discovering what happened to the rest of humanity. I find the story to be quite charming. It's not shown to you in cinematic scenes, but rather hand-drawn sketches in the journal. Each one has Z's father audibly telling you the plot, about Europa, humanity coming there, raising Z as a young child, and what ultimately took place regarding humanity trying to live there. It's very cute and came to be the driving force for me in the latter half, wanting to see the next bit of story to find out what happened with the floating island as Z gets closer to reaching it. Plus, the visual presentation just adds to the charm of the story. It's colorful, somewhat cel-shaded, and has really big Studio Ghibli or Ni no Kuni vibes. While the Switch version made some compromises, it still looks like a pretty little adventure. When it comes to gameplay, Europa is a 3D adventure game, having you explore and platform around large 3D environments, collecting items as you go from point A to point B. With main progression, let's put one thing out there. When you first look at Europa, it kinda looks like a big open world game, and while a lot of the environments are large, it's really not that. Let's go into more detail. Your goal in each of these large levels is to reach the end. To do so, you need to platform around obstacles and solve light puzzles. The main goal of sorts in each of the areas is to follow pillars of light towards either puzzle doors or journal pages. The game has no minimap or anything to jot down where you go, so you look around and head towards the light pillars once you see them. They're fairly easy to notice, and getting to one will show you the way to the next. Each of these areas has different sorts of obstacles. At the start, all you really need to do is platform your way to the end and move on to the next chapter. The game does give you some fun ways to do so. You get a jump and power jump you can pretty much use any time, but you also have a sort of jetpack you collect energy for that lets you thrust into the air so long as you have the energy reserves. This helps you reach the high platforms or just staying in the air as you move across large gaps. Later areas don't really give you more tools to use, but different sorts of puzzles. You'll find gates that need multiple of something to open. Sometimes they're little white wisps you get for exploring and finding them. Other times you need to find green blocks and use your jetpack energy to activate them, and in response, the gate. And later on you get sphere puzzles where you need to find round spheres and push them in place, not unlike puzzles from the Legend trilogy of Tomb Raider. You do find upgrades as you go along. The jetpack only has a bit of energy at the start, but you can find hidden sphere chests to upgrade your max capacity for multiple times the starting amount, helping you reach those higher objects. It's all very simple, and the game stays that way for its entire length. This is meant to be a very calm and casual little adventure. You're not fighting off a militia of robot monsters like in Horizon Zero Dawn. While some of the wildlife does attack you with lasers and energy weapons, they're few and far between, and we don't actually have combat here. Z is robotic, and energy weapons don't really do anything to him. Even if you intentionally stand and take hits or run into mines over and over, you'll get knocked back in frustration or annoyance, but Z cannot die. We should talk about how linear this game is. It looks very large and open, and it's surprisingly not so in nature. Some of the later levels are legitimately large with more you can explore, but most of them are just kind of small and medium-sized areas for you to roam around with just a few hidden things here and there. It looks like you can go anywhere you want with a ton of environments in the background, but stray too far from the path and magical wind flings you right back into the quote-unquote safe zone. Not that this is necessarily bad. Each level has a few things you can explore and find. There are 40 emeralds hidden across the game as the main collectible, often in hard to reach or out of the way areas. It's not like there's no exploration at all. There's actually quite a bit of it. The areas just aren't as big as they seem to be. And that's okay. This game is definitely not meant to be an explore for dozens of hours experience. You're meant to press forward, grab the next journal page for story, and tackle the next big puzzle to move on and find more answers. And I don't hate this aspect. With the style of visuals this game has and audible journal pages, it almost feels like you're playing through a movie. even down to how Z sketches all of the wildlife he finds in his own sketchbook as you traverse the levels and find new things. The system is decent, but there are a couple things that I don't really like about it. First, the controls are a little bit wonky with one of the puzzles. The flow of grabbing the spheres to push is a little touchy. Once you're attached to the sphere, it's fine, but a lot of them I would run into and right past, having to find just the right angle to push Z into it and grab it properly. The other is the fact that this game seems to go back and forth between being a flying exploration game and a normal platformer. You get this great jetpack at the beginning of the game to let you just bypass everything, but you also get a ton of sections that are meant for normal jumping, the game filling it with purple crystals that sap all of your energy reserves, forcing you to not use the jetpack at all. If these sections were in select areas, or if you got the jetpack later on in the game, I think that would be fine. Freedom with the jetpack for a lot of the game and then a couple tricky sections. But I felt the game had quite a lot of these areas, it almost feeling like a big chunk of the game was designed for Europa to not even have the jetpack. With that in mind, let's dive into content and length. This game is pretty short overall. It can easily be completed in one sitting. I did a little bit of exploration, but ultimately only found about a dozen of the 40 emeralds, and finished the game after playing for around 3.5 to 4 hours. Once you do complete the game, all there is to do is replay it. There's no New Game Plus feature or anything, you just start fresh if you want to replay the game and go through the story a second time. Next up is presentation, and this game looks very colorful and pretty. It's definitely made some sacrifices to be on the Switch. There are no shadows, some of the trees look a bit more basic, and there is a slight blur on a lot of the game. But even with a slight blur, it still looks pretty good for what it is. Performance is mostly good as well. It plays at 30 FPS with occasional dips into the 20s. They don't happen often, though the game did crash on me a few times. These crashes happen when transitioning from area to area, like the story-based bubble world before going into a few of the chapters. Thankfully, I lost 0 progress when this happened. I reloaded each time and it resumed at the next chapter. I didn't even have to repeat the area it crashed in. That brings us to battery life, which is fairly standard. Europa gives the original and light models a battery range of 2 to 3 hours, while the V2 and OLED models get 5 to 6 hours. In conclusion, Europa comes to the Switch with a colorful and casual adventure about a robot boy trying to find out what happened to his dad on a planet filled with robotic wildlife. Now, on the downside, some of the controls can be a bit wonky and the performance has hiccups from time to time. But if you just want to wind down with a casual little adventure with pretty much no combat, it's a pretty and cute little adventure. Reviews to Go rates Europa for the Nintendo Switch a 7.5 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching and have a great day.